it's Tracy. Welcome back to my Christmas decorating series here at Rural Refurb in Sussex, England. This week we are in the hallway and the sitting room. As always, it's natural, it's thrifted, and there's some great DIYs for you this week. You're gonna love them. Come on in. Welcome to the hallway, or entryway as you may call it. Last time we were in here, we were Christmas decorating the staircase. Now it's this space's turn. And once we've finished in here, we're going to move into the sitting room and we're going to bring some festive cheer to this space. But let's start with a DIY. Fabulous straw wreath base here from Amazon. I'll link it down below. And I have a hankering to do something with bark. We had a deceased tree, a dead tree that had to come down, and it is featuring all the way through my Christmas decorating. If you're new to the channel, meet Bertie, my furry supervisor, who is somewhat neglecting his duties at the moment and would rather play ball. I'm collecting bark from the dead tree, and I would only ever use bark from a limb that's on the ground, never from a live tree. I'll show you an example here. The deer, we have a lot of deer come through the field. When I planted these trees, they started stripping that one and they killed it. Fortunately, its neighbour, they didn't manage to kill. So if you are interested in doing this project and you want to go out and collect some bark, please, please, please don't take it off a live tree because you will cause disease, damage and death. Okay, lecture over. Let's get back to decorating. I was winging it here by using slightly damp bark, and actually it wasn't working. The glue wouldn't hold it, so to dry it, I popped it in the oven. I've got an Everhot here, a range oven. It's on all the time, and the bottom oven here is a warming oven, which I keep somewhere between about 50 to 70 Celsius. 122 to 158 Fahrenheit. So once I'd got that baked overnight, I was away. It was sticking like a good one. So that's the message, don't use damp wood. Now you can see that there are a few little gaps around. I have a plan. Come down moss hunting with me. This is my storage shed area and we do get a lot of moss down here. I've got a long moss path. Remember the story of my husband clearing that for me as a favour? Nearly broke my heart. We've got moss growing on stones. We've even on our old well got moss growing on the top there. So to actually disguise those gaps, you could just layer more bark over, but I'm actually using an old screwdriver just to poke the moss in there, and it just gives it a little bit more character. Now, if you want to see what I do with this, and I won't be hanging it, then please keep watching till the end, which you're going to want to do anyway because there's loads of tips and tricks coming up. Let's gather in some greenery for decorating. Now these lelandai I planted a few years ago. The canopy is very low, so I've held off raising it until Christmas decorating so I can use the clippings inside. The first tree was done for the staircase, and then when we went on to do the porch, I did this one, and now it's the hallway and sitting room, so it's time to trim this one. Although Bertie thinks maybe a big game of sticky, mummy. Afraid not, Bertie, we've got work to do. Now I love using the lelandai because they hold their moisture for such a long time in and out of water. I'm going to pop back over to the deceased tree and we're going to bring in some twigs as well, which are covered in this gorgeous lichen. It just makes it so interesting for decorating. I like to put everything on an old sheet because then it's easy to maneuver things around. I've put a few cutting implements in there that we are going to need, and then drag it down the other end of the hall and we'll make a start on the windowsill. More bark is cooked, so we'll get that out of the oven. My husband keeps saying, "What's that smell? What are you baking?" Bark. Eyes roll to the top of the head. Life with a decorator. He's a good sport really, and he takes it all in his stride. After adding pine cones, dried eucalyptus and twigs, I'm going to slide in a few of the pampas grass that I dyed. You'll need to see that episode if you've not seen it. And and hydrangea heads. Now I love decorating with these, and they are very much a Christmas theme this year because they're all sprayed copper. And I'm using a can gun. If you've not used one of these, they really save your fingers when you've got a lot to spray. So they're coming out a beautiful copper colour. I'm running metallics through all the decorating this year, accented with the greens, the golds. But the real staples are the natural elements that I'm using. Just love a natural Christmas. In the big pot in the corner, I've got some twisted willow. It grows in the field. And to it, I'm going to add rusty acorns. These hammered metal balls are golf balls, and it was my first Christmas DIY video this year, so please do check that one out if you missed it. As there is a socket close by, I'm going to add some lights, and these copper lights I'm actually going to lay on the top rather than working into the greenery, and I'm going to use museum wax just to nip that end in, and it makes them more stable then. It stops them from falling off. The sheet has done its job containing most of the mess, and so there's just a few bits to sweep up before we can get everything back into position and add a finishing touch, which is a gold acorn and some gold ribbon. Now this double-sided velvet ribbon I absolutely love. You can get it both sides of the pond as well, so I'll link it below. I'm using the green velvet and also this very old Costco ribbon. But enough of ribbons, let's do another DIY. Now regular viewers will recognise this straight away. My £5 Alibaba bin. It's a vintage one. Found it in a charity shop. It's just a little bit yellowy orange for me. So I'm going to show you how I dial down that colour. Super simple method using Annie Sloan Cocoa. Now I did a little experiment on the lid with it and I quite like the way it's toned that colour down. So I'm going to do the whole basket. Now rather than making up a wash, which sometimes can be quite messy, I apply a little bit of the paint to the basket and then spritz it and just keep working it in and around, making sure that everywhere gets covered. Now it's quite chilly here, so I'm just finishing it off with a heat gun. You could use a hairdryer, pop the lid on, and then I think we're good to style with that. Too floppy for me for what I had in my mind, so I'm going to use cable ties just to pull everything together to contain it. Now where I've joined cable ties together, I'm just snipping the ends off, pulling some of the branches through to disguise them. It's actually quite sturdy, so I'm happy with that, and we can add some lights. These are waterfall lights. I've never used these before. These are a new purchase for this Christmas. Now, I believe once I've unravelled everything, you're supposed to hang them from the top, but maybe me, I like to do things a bit different. So I'm doing them upside down. I'm going to take the top and actually use the museum wax to attach it to the side of the basket and then feed each of the 20 strands up and pull them through, work them up the other side. The fairy supervisor thinks it's genius. Thank you, Bertie. The branches were tilting slightly, so I've wedged them into position with a piece of wood. And you may have noticed the lid is wired to the side like a jaunty hat. Let's move over to this corner now, where I have a pot that I did my faux stone effect on, and it stands on top of a torchère, which is basically a posh name for a lamp or a plant stand. Do you remember these garlands? These used to be white. I sprayed them gold. I've got them hanging up around the gallery landing, but this time I'm going to put them in upside down. More waterfall lights, and this time I am going to let them drape down. So I'm just going to pop that in there, untangle each of them. There are actually 400 LEDs here, so it does make a lovely effect with the mirror behind. I really like the layering that I've done on the mantle, so I am leaving that, and I'm just going to add some fresh greenery. And when I put the first stems on, I like to use a little bit of museum wax just on the end to hold it in position. I'm not using any wires, I'm not going to use any command strips or anything like that. And then just add little bits of fresh and the dried. I like to leave negative spaces and not always have things symmetrical. So I'm just going to finish that end off with some of the dark gold ribbon. Over to the other side of the hallway now, and to possibly my most favourite piece that I've got, and it's this big old French sideboard. Just adore it. It weighs an absolute ton. I love the way it's arranged there, so I'm going to keep this super simple. How are we doing, Bertie, so far? Are we getting the wag of approval? I think we are. So let's move over to the other sideboard in the hallway. Now here, I want to do something quite big. I want something quite impactful. And I found a very big branch in the field. Deceased tree, keeps on giving. It's going to be fabulous, celebrated all the way through Christmas. And it really is big. It's touching the ceiling, bending over. It's very big. Even for me, and you won't hear me say that very often, because normally I say, if you're going to have one, darlings, have a big one. Now, I did test the vase beforehand to make sure it was watertight. Let's hope it really is watertight. This huge heavy bauble was found in a charity shop. It was in one of my shop and haul videos. I think it's the one where we went over to the Malvern Fair. I'm just going to use some of the museum wax underneath just to make sure it stays completely in position. Onto the workbench under the stairs. I actually found this in an antique store on Christmas Eve. It was just popped in that position when we brought it in from the car, and it's never moved since. I absolutely adore it. On top of a round that we cut from the deceased tree, I'm adding a copper bowl, which was a charity shop find and works beautifully with this year's scheme. Next to some more dried bark, I'm adding a Bertie find, which is a shed antler, and my all-time favourite faux candles. I found these on Amazon last year, so I will link them below, and I've used them all year round. They are brilliant. Moss balls are actually golf balls, and yes, there is a video on those if you haven't seen me make them yet. I'm also bringing out some of my DIY baubles from last year. I'll link that video below as well. These large baubles were originally from HomeSense, but it was several years ago. I love to keep on reusing. This sideboard keeps catching my eye. It needs something else, and that's what it needed. Faux candle and a brass candlestick. Let's head into the sitting room, and we'll start off with the windowsill. Now, there is a direct heat source right beneath that. That big old cast iron radiator chucks out so much heat. So I'm going to go faux and dry, no fresh on here. These garlands came over from America via my son, and this one was from HomeSense. It just pads it out and makes it look thicker. I'm going to drape the copper lights down either side of the radiator as well, just to give a little cascading effect. And my favourite faux candles come with a remote control. I'm going to keep the inglenook simple. It's very much a working fireplace. We use it every day throughout the winter. Over to the other side of the sitting room. Let's get that sofa moved out of the way and we'll go see the sledge stash. I've got 5 vintage sledges. Last time I chose one to use in the porch, and now we're down to 4. So I'm going to select one in order to use in the sitting room. Regular viewers will notice the picture frame still sat there. I just ran out of time to hang them in the snug. Now, what to put on the sledge? I have got 5 of these conifers. One last week we used in the porch. This week we're going to take one into the house, but we don't want to take a black plastic pot in. It's not going to look very nice. I'm going to need to keep it watered, so that's why I've popped it in some plastic. And then I'm going to wrap it in this roll of mesh. I got this several years ago from Costco. Popped it in a cupboard, completely forgot about it, and then brought it out last year to do my sofa installation on the porch. I'm actually going to keep that in position, just wrapping some wire around and then using the pincers just to really tighten up that wire, and we can get it into the house. More waterfall lights. I've really gone for it this year. They're only 5 watts, so they're so cheap to run. I popped my gloves on and started working them into the plant, but actually I preferred them just dangling. More lights. I'm going to add some more lights, but I better just check in with the supervisor. Yep. We've got the wag of approval. We're good to go. So these were originally silver. I've had them many, many years. And I finished them with rub and buff just to change the colour and make them coordinate with the scheme. Now I'm going to pop this basket back. We use it as a side table, and we're going to do another DIY. This was originally from a Christmas gift exchange. It's white. I don't want it white. So I'm going to use some dark wax to change the colour. And as my regular viewers know, if it stands still long enough, it'll get waxed. More museum wax. You really need this in your arsenal when you're decorating. I'm just popping a little bit on the bottom there just to create some stability for when I add the clear baubles. coffee table styling now, and this is where the bark wreath is going to live. Now, if you fancy doing this, but you're concerned about bugs and insects coming into your house, using the oven method, that will sort that problem, and it will also dry the wood. Or you can dry the wood in the sun, but if you're still concerned about bugs, then you can actually spritz it with a essential oils and bleach mixture. The oils that are supposed to work the best are lemon, lavender, peppermint, so you could do a mixture of those or just some of them. Cup of water, few drops of oil, teaspoon of bleach, give it a good spritz, seal it all up in plastic 24-48 hours, and that will kill any bugs. It's not just pretty decorating on this channel, you get lots of practical tips too. Now, I've not said this for a long time, but if you're watching and enjoying, can you just check that you are subscribed? Costs you nothing, but it massively helps the channel.